with my Grok AI script that I had some fun getting Grok to figure out and realize, hey, Grok, why don't you do a summary of this stuff? And so I have a decent description to go along with it. So hopefully the voice is working right now and everything is good to go. So let's get down to the Realist exit from the Iran war and NASA's fission ion drive to Mars power plays on Earth and beyond. Once again, I do not have any of these things, but it's kind of fun to read out what Grok's suggestions are. Open cold on a split screen. Explosive Iranian missile site strikes and oil tanker harassment and flames. Quick cut to sleek SR-1 freedom concept with faint blue, ion blue, accelerating away from Earth towards Mars. And I lean forward under low-key lighting, serious tone. Welcome back to Spy Guy, the channel that cuts through the media fog with cold tradecraft level analysis and zero ideological spin and my own unique take. So we're on day 32 of the 2026 Iran war. U.S. and Israeli precision strikes have gutted key nuclear facilities, ballistic missile factories, and Iranian naval assets in the Gulf. They still have those speedboats, remember. Tehran is responding with scattered missile barrages on Israel. And Houthi allies are now stepping up Red Sea disruptions, and the Strait of Hormuz to the choke point for 20% of global oil is turning into a floating powder keg. Well, I don't think it's turning into a floating powder keg. Oil prices are spiking, shipping lanes are rerouting around Africa, and back-channel messages are flying between capitals. So yeah, I went to check the price of gas today. It was $1.77 in some areas in Canada or in Hamilton. In the other places, it was $1.60. Then I go down the other street and it's 10 cents cheaper. Simultaneously, on the high frontier, NASA dropped news in March 2026, the fast-tracking SR-1 Freedom, the first U.S. nuclear-powered interplanetary spacecraft, with a launch target of December 28. Destination, of course, is Mars. Powered not by massive chemical stages or fragile solar arrays, but by a compact fission reactor feeding advanced ion thrusters. Today, we're combining both stories under one realist foreign policy and power projection lens on Earth. How this Iran conflict actually ends, not with Hollywood regime change, but through the cold math of national interest and balance of power. In space, how nuclear electric propulsion could fundamentally change America's ability to project power and presence to Mars and beyond. No cheerleading, no doomsaying, just disciplined analysis of the interest, capabilities, and realistic end states. If you're here for hard intel over talking points, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, smash that bell, and let's dive deep. This one's for the long haul, 30 minutes of straight analysis. Good thing I got my water here. So, first up, the Iran war current snapshot setting the board. Graphics, detailed timeline from Feb 28 trigger, targeted strikes on leadership, nuclear sites, through current day, animated map showing strike locations, proxy arcs, Hezbollah, Houthis, U.S. Israeli air corridors, Gulf shipping lanes, casualty and cost counters, ticking up realistically. Maybe I should ask them to see if you can make that image for me. Anyways, let's start with a clear-eyed sit right up on the ground, or rather in the air and waters around Iran. The conflict that ignited on February 28th with coordinated U.S. and Israeli strikes focused on Iran's most dangerous capabilities, advanced ballistic missile production lines, underground nuclear enrichment sites, and key IRGC command nodes. Reports indicate that Supreme Leader was eliminated earlier, though I have my doubts necessary on that. But along with several top Larry Janney figures. I don't think I've heard that term before. Iranian air defenses and Navy heavy losses, over 150 vessels affected in some assessments. U.S. B-52s and Israeli fighters have operated with relative freedom in Iranian airspace. And that's telling. If you can fly B-52s, a 70-year-old plane around, you have something going for you. Iran's retaliation has been classically asymmetrical but constrained. Depleted long-range missile salvos targeting Israeli, many intercepted and increased Houthi drone and missile activity and attempts to harass commercial tankers in the Strait. Casualties are mounting on all sides, civilian and military. Pentagon supplemental spending is already approaching 18 billion and climbing. Well, they've asked for 200 billion, but that's only for if this goes to the end of the year, which doubt will happen. Global economic ripple effects are real higher fuel costs hitting American drivers at the pump, and really crazy prices in Europe, I'm hearing. From a pure realist perspective, we don't assign moral labels. We map interest. United States, keep critical energy sea lanes open. Not necessarily my take, as I've said before. I think this is a lot about screwing over Europe to make them come to the table on Ukraine. Prevent a nuclear-armed Iran that could destabilize the entire region and force favorable alliances. Avoid tying down munitions and attention needed for peer competition with China in the Indo-Pacific. Israel. Break the encirclement by Iranian proxies and eliminate existential near-term threats from missiles and nuclear breakout. And Iran's finally ensure regime survival, maintain enough conventional and proxy deterrent to remain a regional player, and avoid total collapse that could invite chaos or partition. I don't think anyone's looking to partition up Iran other than maybe the UK, but they, as I've said repeatedly, UK and France are the ones really behind. They literally installed the Shah. They installed the Shah. The British and Americans installed the Shah, and then British and French installed the Ayatollah. That's kind of the history of the thing, and people who don't get into do their reading on this kind of stuff have to rely on people like me who do. Realist principles, why this lens works. Simple animated graphic international system as chessboard in anarchy. States as pieces labeled by power, not ideology. Arrows showing temporary alliances, offshore balancing, relative gains. Historical quick cuts of the Korea 1953 armistice, Sinai disengagements, Cold War detente moments. Foreign policy realism isn't about being cynical or hawkish. It's the default of the software of the state system. The world has no central authority. Every nation seeks to maximize its security and influence relative to potential threats. Ideology, democracy promotion, or moral crusades are secondary at best. What matters first? Geography, population, resources, industrial base, and military reach. Yeah, I'm getting pretty good at this now. And I'm going to suggest my one loyal listener is not screaming at me that the sound's not working. So I'm going to say it's working for sure. Applied to Iran, this isn't a weak, failed state. It possesses defensible terrain, mountains and deserts that complicate invasion, a large population, and a network of proxy militias that act as low-cost force multipliers. That being said, if they're not getting paid, which we're starting to hear about because of the blocking of the strait, full occupation or forced regime change would likely produce the same power backing we saw in Iraq after 2003 insurgency, refugee crisis, and opportunities for even more dangerous actors. We seem to have found some guy who is the parliamentary speaker, so the equivalent of the Speaker of the House, who we seem to be able to do that. And the president's also been making noises that as long as certain security guarantees can be made, basically, don't come back and shoot at us, we're willing to talk. So that's kind of been the latest stuff out of Iran. The U.S. vital interest here is limited and clear. Degrade Iran's ability to threaten the Strait of Hormuz and nuclear threshold capabilities. Then disengage with creating a bigger mess that drains resources from the primary strategic challenge, great power competition with a rising China. Overinvestment in the Middle East has repeatedly proven costly in blood and treasure, while adversaries elsewhere exploit this distraction. Yeah, that was kind of been my perspective. We want to take out Iran, his ability to fund all these proxies in the area, and then we don't constantly have the city of London generated in a conflict up every so often to make a few more trillion dollars in investments. The Middle East wants to be a peaceful power, not just an oil spigot. And they have to get rid of the last bad actor in the area, and that's Iran. And they don't need to get rid of it by just making sure the regime understands you can't be doing this kind of crap. Get out of the proxy business, and this wouldn't happen to you. No one cares about North Korea's nuclear weapons because they don't go. They're not trying to overthrow their neighbors. History shows wars of this type rarely end in unconditional surrender. Yeah, very few wars do. They conclude when the stronger side calculates that continued fighting costs more than the marginal gains, or when both sides see a face-saving compromise that restores a tolerable balance. The armistice in Korea, U.S. disengagement from Vietnam, or the tacit understandings that stabilize parts of this Cold War. And that's, yeah, I keep getting people saying, we won every battle in Vietnam, and yet we still lost. I'm like, no, you won. You left in 1972. Is it your fault that Vietnamese couldn't keep it together, that they were more interested in drug smuggling and shipping using APCs to move produce around? I mean, that's the problem with that. Like, you got out with peace with honor. So they're not your fault the other guy couldn't keep his crap together. And yeah, plenty of battles were lost in Vietnam. I remember I was once playing a game of Charlie Company, and I was in a position where I was leading a relief convoy to this fire base. And I have a bunch of I have one airstrike, a bunch of M113 APCs, and 1 or 2 tanks. So we're driving along. We get hit by some RPGs. I deploy my first platoon, first couple of squads out to go up against the RPGs, and the rest. And I order the rest of the force down the track because we've got enough guys to contain this threat here. And we continue to relieve the base. And when we're just getting arrival on the bay, onto the outpost, the guys come pouring over the last assault of the Viet Cong are coming in. And I use my one airstrike, and I get about half the guys, but then there's drift. So the bomb basically moves over, my airstrike drifts over the entire enemy group, and it blows them up. And we relieved the fire base. And I said to my friend who was running it, who had been in Vietnam during the last few weeks, right before Saigon fell. And I said, so am I getting a bronze star for that? And he's like, you're probably getting a silver star for that and a promotion. And I'm like, really? And he's like, oh yeah, the original guy, who was the guy who did your job originally, when he ran into the RPGs, he deployed all his men and dropped the airstrike on the RPGs. But you figured it out. I'm like, well, I didn't necessarily figure it out, but I just used the appropriate amount of force. But that fire base got completely overrun. And when a fire base gets completely overrun, that's a loss. So lots of stories like that came out of Vietnam, but there's this myth, we won every battle and lost the war. No, you lost plenty of battles. That's how the war begins. That's where that broken arrow moment comes in. Okay. Finally, how the Iran war ends, detailed 3 paths. On screen, numbered paths with probability sliders, 60, 25, 15. Animated maps for each scenario showing redrawn influence spheres, back-channel routes via Oman, Qatar, Turkey, and Pakistan. Oil flow resumption icons. So how does this war realistically wind down? How are the 3 most possible endgames ranked by current power realities? So limited victory and face-saving deal, most likely 60% odds. And that's kind of what I think is happening here. We did the load. We got the tactical victory. We did great. We pushed back their missile program so many years. Remember, Iran was agreeing to test bed all China's new hypersonics. I don't think that's going to be happening anymore now. Okay, U.S. and Israel reach a point where they can credibly declare core military objectives achieved. Iranian missile production set back years, nuclear programs significantly delayed, naval threat in the Gulf neutralized. At that stage, quiet diplomacy facilitated by neutral players like Oman or Qatar or Pakistan produces a pragmatic understanding. Iran agrees to verifiable caps on uranium arrangements, say no higher than 60%. Personally, I think they'll just not. They might just take the trade deal where the United States provides them uranium and for their nuclear program, or Russia does. More likely, Russia gets to the uranium. Because Russia's, as I keep pointing out since the start of the Ukraine war, Russia's been supplying America with this uranium for its nuclear power plants and its nuclear missiles. Fun times. And dials back proxy attacks from Hezbollah and Houthis. I think they might. Houthis are less of a proxy force. They're just kind of an aligned group with Iran. Hezbollah, I think, is definitely a proxy group. And I might see them. I think they'll agree to, especially with Lebanon chasing them out. I think that'll end their relationship. That'll be the face-saving thing. We get this, and we agree to stop supporting Hezbollah. And I think Hezbollah has been a rapidly depreciating asset anyways. In exchange, phasing and lifting the most crippling oil import sanctions, assurance of no large-scale U.S. ground presence on Iranian soil, and a tacit U.S. signal that full regime change is off the table. Well, they're making the deal with the new dictator kind of deal. The Strait of Hormuz gradually reopens under monitored international shipping. Oil markets stabilize. This is textbook realpolitik. You may apply enough pressure to force negotiation without demanding the kind of surrender that breeds permanent resistance. Trump administration signals already hinted at openness to a deal once objectives are met. Iran's surviving leadership likely under figures like Mojtaba Khomeini. I don't think that guy's going to be the one. I don't think we even know where he is. Understands survival. Trump's martyrdom when the regime's back is against the wall. And they really have shown that they're not about martyrdom. That's a lot of propaganda out there from what I think. The next one down, great power mediated armistice, 25% odds. China and Russia have strong incentives to prevent total Iranian collapse. Beijing buys discounted Iranian crude and wants to keep Hormuz trade routes viable, ideally settled in yuan. I'm not too sure about that. Moscow relies on Iran as a sanction-busting partner and arms customer. Not necessarily. Iran has a very large domestic arms manufacturer. They're one of the big players in low-value weapons to all sorts of groups around the world. So they have a decent arms trade. So I think Russia would prefer that out of the way. And I think Russia, also Moscow, still is hurting from all that Chechen support Iran was giving them. The special military operation. Expect indirect facilitation through Pakistan, Turkey, or even a multilateral summit. Outcome, Iran retains sufficient conventional forces for internal regime security. The U.S. and Israel secure binding limits on missiles and nukes with some verification mechanism. No one gets everything, but spheres of influence stabilize. America remains the dominant offshore bouncer in the Gulf without a permanent entanglement. Finally, part 3, which is given the 15% odds. Prolonged low-level stalemates drifting to freeze. Hardliners in Tehran or Washington dig in, leading to months of sporadic tit-for-tat, cheap Iranian drones, proxy strikes, met with precision U.S.-Israeli counterstrikes on remaining factories. This attrition favors the home defender, but bleeds everyone economically, eventually paying forces convergence on path 1. Key intelligence indicators to watch in the coming weeks: sudden surge in shuttle diplomacy out of Muscat or Doha, softening language in Iranian state media about the resistance axis, repositioning of U.S. carrier groups eastward, and critically stabilization in oil futures markets. Absolute red line for any realistic strategy: no major U.S. ground invasion. Well, they can't do it. I have my friend Kelly on and point out the United States does not have the shipping capability to do another Iraq war. Projected cost hundreds of billions and troops pinned down would have a strategic advantage to peer competitors watching from afar. Now we transition Earth globe with conflict zones fading to Mars against starfield. Text overlay from balancing power on Earth to projecting power to the cosmos. Really, realism doesn't stop at the atmosphere. Great power competition is increasingly multi-domain, including the ultimate high ground, space. Sustained sufficient power, projection beyond low Earth orbit will determine who sets the rules on the Moon, Mars, and the lunar economy in the coming decades. That brings us to NASA's ambitious new mission, a direct application of nuclear technology to overcomes the physics limit that have constrained deep space travel for 60 years. Here we're next, NASA SR1 Freedom mission. Tech breakdown. Detailed animated cutaway of the SR1 Freedom compact HALEU fusion reactor and at end of deployable boom, radiation shielding explained, heat to electricity conversion, striking Stirling or Brayton cycle visuals, power routing to cluster of advanced ion thrusters, xenon propellant flow, side-by-side comparison charts, chemical propulsion, high, short. Oh, God. Yeah, I'm going to maybe I have to reform my A2EI account again to get some of these visuals going. Announced in March 2026, SR1 Freedom repurposed much of the already built bus from the Lunar Gateway's power and propulsion element. The key upgrade, replacing solar arrays with a compact fission reactor, producing over 20 kilowatts of electrical power using high-assay, low-enriched uranium fuel, higher performance than commercial reactors, but still proliferation resistant and heavily safeguarded. Safety protocol. The reactor remains inert during launch and only goes critical in a safe high orbit within 48 hours. Once online, it generates steady electricity even as the spacecraft moves away from the sun. This electricity powers a cluster of next-generation ion thrusters. Here's how it works in tradecraft terms. Xenon gas is injected in the thrust chamber. High-voltage electricity strips electrons, creating positively charged ions. These ions are then accelerated out the exhaust at velocities of 30 to 50 kilometers per second per electrostatic grids. Action and reaction produces thrust. Modest in absolute terms, but it can fire continuously for months or years. The result is an exceptionally high specific impulse, meaning for more change in velocity, delta V per kilogram of propellant compared to chemical rockets. For the Mars transit, expect roughly a 1-year journey, which is still half the speed of solar sails or conventional rockets. In the 2028 launch window, competitive with optimized chemical trajectories, but with far greater efficiency and payload margin. And we are thinking that these spacecrafts, once the technology gets up to it, it will be possible to make the trip for manned spacecraft travel in 45 days. Which would be incredibly fast, given the historic 2-year turnaround time that NASA has always been thinking about. Also, the spacecraft won't need to carry massive fuel tanks. Instead, it spirals efficiently out of Earth orbit and maintains low but constant acceleration until it gets to the point where it would have to decelerate to get into orbit. Primary objectives: demonstrate full nuclear electric propulsion operations in deep space. The first time a fission reactor has powered ion thrusters for interplanetary crews. And we were working on this stuff back in the 60s, but because the gold standard, all these in the Vietnam War, all these programs were cut. But if you ever watch that show For All Mankind, one of the plot lines is that you get the Vietnam War over early so you can put more money into the space program, which is definitely something we could have had happen. Deliver 3 advanced Skyfall helicopters, the Ingenuity class successors. After arrival, they deploy into the Martian atmosphere to scout for subsurface water ice deposits and identify safe resource landing zones for future crewed missions. Expect a lot of high-res video and data being back. Validate the reactor and power system for future scalability. Designs will be shared with industry partners. After the helicopter drop, the core spacecraft could even transition into an extended mission, acting as a communications relay or conducting additional reconnaissance. Why the fission ion drive matters, advantages and strategic impact. Charts, mission mass, payload comparisons, timeline graphics showing evolution from RTG's Voyager to this true reactor. Future vision on 100 kilowatt plus NEP tugs enabling crews in Mars in 3 to 4 months. Mars surface-based concept with paired fission power. This mission matters because Mars is unforgiving on power. Solar intensity drops to the square distance from the sun, and global dust storms can blanket plant panels for months. A fission reactor delivers constant, reliable output regardless of location or weather, exactly what's needed for sustained operations. Compared to pure chemical propulsion, ion drives excel at moving mass efficiently over long durations. SR1 proves you can integrate a live reactor, manage thermal rejection and radiation in vacuum, and operate the stack reliably. Success here opens the door to megawatt-class nuclear electric systems for crewed missions. Shorter transit times mean less cosmic radiation exposure for astronauts and more mass dedicated to habitats or in situ resource utilization. It also pairs perfectly with planned surface fission power systems for Martian bases. End-to-end nuclear architecture, efficient crews, and reliable surface energy. This closes a 6-decade gap since America's last space fission experiments and maintains a technological edge against other nations eyeing nuclear propulsion. Commercial spin-offs could include deep space cargo or asteroid resource missions. Now, what this also means is that getting to the asteroids, which are a lot closer, we could bring back a large-scale asteroid and mine it for our needs. Great power competition could be much more in the space race like we see for all mankind. And instead of like fighting stupid wars over resources at home, we could be finally getting out and touching the inner planets within our lifetime. There's so much possibility here. And like, we might be making that show Star Cops into a reality. Risk and intelligence, takeaways for both stories. Split screen, eyes only, mellow style, left, Iran, right, risk, escalation, Hormuz mining, right, space race, timeline compression, radiation hardening, regulatory approval, watch indicators bullet list. Okay, realist caveats on both fronts. For Iran, overreach into full occupation, well, that's never going to happen. Invites quagmire and hands narrative victory to the adversary. Miscalculation by Iran, full mining the strait could trigger global recession. For SR1 freedom, the 33-month timeline from announcement to launch is aggressive. Challenges include radiation shielding, boom deployment, reliability, and meeting strict launch safety rules for nuclear systems. A reactor or thruster could downgrade the mission to partial success, but even that advances the state of the art. Intelligence watch list. Iran diplomacy spikes out of Omar, Qatar, oil price stabilization, and carrier movements. Space, reactor ground testing milestones, hardware integration photos, successful helicopter drop on Mars. Success in either domain strengthens America's relative power position, since that's the team we're all on. So, or maybe you're not. Maybe you're on Russia or China's team. Who knows? Close. You address camera directly. Background smoothly merges Iran map feeding to Mars with SR1 concept orbit above, and the spy guy logo pulses. Yeah. From the realist perspective, the Iran war will likely end through calculated restraint that stores a workable balance of power without permanent entanglement. Yeah, and we're getting some spin-off effects as I usually make about Europe. Hopefully this will help bring down Ukraine. I had one Ukrainian guy trying to tell me, Russians' March offensive is not doing very well. What do you mean March offensive? You're still in the Rasputia, buddy. You pretend we don't know what that is. Well, and Rasputia is the Russian mud season in Ukraine. Nothing moves. The big offensive will probably come May and June, like it always does. Okay. And the Iran war, calculated restraint that works at the same time. NASA's fission ion drive on SR1 Freedom represents a serious leap in projecting sustained power into the solar system, turning nuclear physics into efficient delta V for the high frontier. Earthly realism demands disciplined exits. Space realism demands technological superiority. Both serve the same goal, preserving and expanding American interest in an anarchic world and beyond. What's your take? Quick deal in the Gulf or a longer grind? Is the fission drive the game changer for crewed Mars or just a solid demo? Drop your intel in the comments below. If this deep dive delivered value, drop a like and share it with their operators who need straight analysis. Wow, I like how Grok is suggesting next episode. Post-conflict proxy networks are detailed surface fission reactor plans for Mars bases. Stay sharp, stay informed. This is the Spy Guy out. Also, remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And if you want, help me revive my Spy Guy at locals.com page. Let's start creating a community together. Okay, I don't have a reaction video today like I was hoping to do. I was on my two-way call in the morning, and that went on really long, and then I got groceries, and it just, time ran away with me. But I do like having these assisted AI scripts and just the general suggestions and ideas. So I like how the dichotomy of the war versus the space program and trying to get away from that. So if you like this stuff, like I say, like, share, subscribe, and and Spy Guy